Howdys and salutations, y'all! Sorry for the late start today, but it is holiday season, which means things are busy and exciting and always changing and schedules may be a little bit flexible. On that note, I would not count on any streams next week, and I don't know for the week after, because that is Christmas and New Year's, respectively. But for the time being, we will still have streams this week, and we will be starting a new style study. For the two remaining streams that I know for sure we'll have this year. I hope we do more. We'll see, because 2023 has been fun. We've had lots of ups and lots of downs, I'll say that much, but it's been good for the streaming. And so today, worrying not about what will come up in the next weeks, but just what we'll be doing today and tomorrow, we are starting our next style study topic. So we just wrapped up Witch Hat Atelier, which is just a lovely series. I highly recommend you go check it out if you haven't already. And today we are starting Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. Another wonderful series. I will say, for me personally, I found that after the Mage Challenge arc, I won't say anything more than that. This is a spoiler-free stream, as these always will be. I realize we're working out of Volume 4 here, but I've been very specific about the reference images that I've grabbed, so we shouldn't have anything to worry about there. But yes, I will say after the Mage Academy arc, admittedly, it felt like the series got sort of away from the roots that I enjoyed from it a bit. Still very exciting. But man, especially the first 4 volumes, it's just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Oh hey May, how are you doing? Welcome in! We're doing our next style study, this one being Frieren, which I gotta say I stinking love Frieren. At least the starting part. And I know they're just releasing the anime for it that I need to check out. It's a lot of fun. So this one, written by Kanehito Yamada, and then art by Tsukasa Abe. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, we know that the manga's great. Their work is done. But we'll see if we can replicate and learn a little bit. And put some of those skills to use that we learned from our Frieren studies. Today and tomorrow, though, to sort of wrap out the year of streams, I don't know if we'll do any over the holidays or not, we'll be focusing mostly on structures, architecture, and landscapes, sort of like we did when we started out with Frieren. However, I think they're going to have a lot less use as far as learning how to draw the people. It's a very different style between the characters and the landscapes in this one. However, I think they're still worth studying, and there's some interesting stuff we can pick up. So that's what we'll be doing. So let's take a look-see. Oh, good, we've had the reference image up the whole time. Well, that's fine. Yes! Oh yeah, the animation was so smooth on that. It looked really good. Unless you put even more since then, in which case I will have to check it out. But let's see. For now, let's take a look-see at this. Because there is one thing, just observing, let's take a second, but while we kick this off, we will do the art soon, but I do want to take a second to really appreciate what we're looking at in this reference. So this one's obviously like a road or an alley in a city, a very medieval-ish fantasy town, as you might expect. Very, very different from what we actually saw in Witch Hat, despite having a similar fantasy-ish setting. Frieren focuses much more on the interpersonal interactions and the changes over time. So the emphasis, like, don't get me wrong, the cities are still wonderful, but it's definitely not quite the same priority. As you see in Witch Hat, which is a lot more about exploring the world and the nature of it. So it really shows up in the art style. And part of that shows here in that Witch Hat, a lot of the landscapes really do look completely hand-done start to finish. I don't know if they actually are or not, but they really aim for that style. Whereas this one, they're focusing on the characters, so you'll see a lot more shading that appears to be very clearly digital, which, for the record, is not cheating, it's not a hack, it's not inferior, it's just a different technique, which allows them to put more emphasis on the characters here. So you'll see we have this very consistent grid of cross-hatching here, we'll have these clouds, and then a few other pieces in here as we get into it, especially in some of our other references, which I can pull up, like this style of trees and the screen tones on top of those. And then it shows, I mean, it really shows in the trees here, which again, I'm not saying this show's good or bad, it just is a different stylistic choice, which is very interesting to me. I should have gotten more of the cityscape, because there's some of the cities where you can really see a very specific style of shading, and it's an interesting way to use it. So I may actually look at that a little bit. I mean, we can look at the composition of this scene first. I think that might be a good place for us to begin. And I'm going to go for the full black pen this time, just because I think it gets us slightly sharper results, partly on the title cards, partly just in general. But let's go in and let's see. I think Micron is still what we're going to want here. So let's, before we break into these fun little effects, let's dig out some of those new Micron brushes. Yeah, I know what you mean. I tend to prefer a lot of traditional, well, for my sketching too, but for shading as well. I find that I can just, I still struggle with digital control even after like 2 years of doing this. And I feel like with more traditional pens and pencils and shading options, I feel like I've got a better grasp on it somehow. Just skills to practice. I haven't practiced all that much digital shading, truthfully. I've kept a very sort of cel-shaded approach with very little blending. Okay, hold on, let's find... I need to sort my brushes. Oh no. Is it this one? No. Is it this one? Yes. Okay, here we go. Hey, Kiwi! Thanks for dropping in! Welcome back! Let's see, we were just kicking off our Frieren style study here. I'm going to try out a different Micron pen set from last time. Do we want this one? That one feels a little bit too smooth, actually. We can try Fun Finaliner. It's got some potential. We can try the other one. Oh! Yeah, like, that might be a good thing to try, too. Like, the digital ones, you can get really clean edges, which is nice for certain things, but it also... It has a very different feel. My big thing is, like, I realize I use tilt so much in my traditional art. It's a really essential part of my sort of drawing process. And I still haven't found a lot of pens that interact with it well. I know CSP can support it, but I feel like people don't use it that much. That's something I want to work on. Because most people with digital, you train to use pressure instead, typically. Let's see. I'm going to go with Fun Finaliner 1 for now. We may go to the Grittier 2 at some point. I'm also going to kick it up just a little bit. Oh yeah, I mean, Procreate definitely leans into it, especially with the iPad and the whole tablet. Like, the tablet as your art surface, I can totally see that. And I think CSP probably has resources for it that I've just struggled to find a little bit. Okay, so now that I've left my reference image over all of our pen studies, that's fine. Let's scoot that back to the corner, maybe. Nope, not my entire overlay if I can help it. Nope, not my entire overlay if I can. I'm gonna have to move this to the top layer again. It's a little bit finicky still. There we go. Okay. And that should be enough of the mouse clicking sounds for a little while, and we can go back to our tablet, which the microphone does not pick up nearly so badly. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And that's one thing I want to look at here is, like, CSP has interesting tools that you can get some interesting streaking with, but they're very much, like, it's a different approach. It's not built into the casual, like, angle and all of that. So, different styles. All right, and I actually kind of want to do this on a, well, let's do our little perspective study real quick, just a little side bonus dealy. I mean, hey, if it looks shaded, then it ain't fake shading. Okay, so let's look at one thing on this real quick. It's a good chance to talk about perspective and horizon lines once again, just because never hurts to refresh on those, especially in scenes, and especially in one that has a fairly distinct one-point perspective here, which is interesting. So, this one is one-point perspective for the most part. You can tell because all of the lines across this alleyway are vanishing roughly to the same spot, which, best as I can tell, is right between the main characters' heads, which is perfect. That's perfect for composition, because intentionally or not, it draws your eye towards the main characters, even though they're facing away from us and small. So it's really important for the other elements of the scene to sort of point us in their direction. So I'm going to get us a casual line. Oh, let me get my tablet tilted the right way. Had to move my whole setup around. Oh, okay, so speed. I think they substitute speed for angle for this one, for the types of things I go for. So that might be something I can draw on a little bit. Haha, terrible pun, let's go. Okay, and then I'm not going to worry about capturing this one-to-one. I want to mostly focus on the feel of the composition here. So, if that's our vanishing point, then let's see, this one is coming down roughly, it's like 3/4 above, 1/4 below, I would say. We've got another one over here that's kind of on the other side of the characters. I'm getting, like, not the house that's angled outwards, but specifically the ones that are still in the same angle as every other house on this block. And then we've got a fairly steep angle here coming up, which we can sort of trace down towards, well, we'll carry it on a little bit further, because we also have this one down below at a softer angle, which is landing us roughly, I mean, if we put our horizon line in the right place, which we haven't, let's go ahead and put it there, because that's roughly the right angle for the side of the street. I'm going to scooch our horizon line up a little bit. That's why we use vector layers here. And this is just a very sloppy sort of example of what they're doing with this, sort of structurally, before we get into the style. And I'm sure for most folks, like, perspective and composition and stuff isn't new information, but it never hurts to rehash it, because I forget about it all the time. Nice. This other side of the street is actually considerably steeper. Plan the eraser. Dagnabbit. Okay. Like, I'm gonna even go so far as to say it really ought to be aligned more like that. There we go. Let's see. Using the pencil brush for Kid Icarus. Yeah! Oh! Yeah, that is nice. I love being able to use tools to show changes in time, and, like, an intentional style change. That's a really cool thing to be able to do. Oh, man. Oh, I can't wait to see how those turn out. I mean, I've already seen some of them, but, like, oh, man. Yeah. I still want to practice. That's one of the reasons I'm doing these style studies, is it's one thing to figure out a style, although you certainly don't have to limit yourself to one, but it's another thing to figure out how to actually apply that style in a meaningful way. And that's a great example of actually applying it in a way that has a meaning. It's not just randomly like, oh, this is fun. There's some thought put into it. Let's see. So this one is actually fairly tight. I'm gonna go with, like, the distant house is right there. We've got, once again, sort of the softer angle on the actual road because we're closer to the ground level than the top level. Okay, yeah, I'll check it out after stream. Thank you for letting me know. I always love to see the art that people are working on. I always love when people share those. Okay. So here we have, oh jeepers, that one's quite distant. So I am just very much loosely sketching this in, but we have our vanishing point here. So everything's going to our horizon line, and we can see that even if we remove these actual lines that point to the vanishing point, your eye is still drawn in that direction because all of the actual structures are aimed at it. And I ought to have just used the line tool for this, but you know what? We're testing out new brushes, so we will continue to test out new brushes. Now let's see. Ah, yes. Okay. So we can talk a little bit about, like, because it's not just obviously the silhouettes of the buildings. You have the balcony on this one that comes out just a little bit over here, and actually I may go ahead and sketch that one out with just a hair more detail because it'll be relevant to the next thing we do. But not too much. Just want to sort of very, very fine, very precise lines for everything structurally in this particular manga, which is really lovely actually. But it also does give it that slightly more digital feel. So you can see, this is the thing I do. I've picked it up with my traditional pens. When I'm trying to line up where I'm going to actually draw my next line, I basically, much in the way that you can sort of line up a golf shot before you walk up to the ball, I basically run the path a few times. Like you can see my cursor, I'm aiming, because I want this, I need to get from this corner right here, and it needs to point towards this vanishing point. If I get it way off, then it's going to look out of proportions. Or just wonky, or like... No, even MC Escher used this stuff very well. It'll just look bad, most likely, unless it's a very intentional choice. So there we go. We've got our top one here, which can't just be parallel. Your hand may want it to be, but it's actually going to be a tiny bit more angled, so you've got to sort of line it up once again. And let's see, I'll go ahead and just throw this... I mean, this really does get almost all the way to the end, so I probably ought to continue these just a hair further. And gotta be careful with these edge pieces too, because once you're thinking on one axis, it's easy to get out of whack for what's actually vertical. And then another one. Oop, angled that one slightly off because it needs to get... There we go, that's better. Not perfect, but better. Oops. Ah, jeepers. Trying to actually get proper straight lines in proper, like, perspective feels as bad as trying to draw a proper circle. Sometimes you're just at it for a while. Okay, there we go. Let's see. And I'm focusing mainly on 1-point perspective. Oh yeah, by all means, just, like, definitely tag me in whatever art you draw, Kiwi. I'd love to see that. Yeah, that's part of why I came up with... Obviously, Salt's a fun D&D NPC from back in the day, but she's also, like, a fun design that's, like, not too crazy difficult, so it's fun to, like, try to put her in different situations. So, by all means. Let's see. We've got kind of the second tier down here. Which, once again... And again, like, see, like, with digital art especially, there are other tools for this. I'm sure y'all actually online here know this, but for anyone who's watching, like, there's 1,000,001 ways to do this better and more precisely. Like, you can already see that, like, my actual angles are probably pretty off on some of these. Like, if we wanted this to be properly precise, this would be the way to do it. But I'm trying to break in the pen, too, so, like, you know. But it also shows that, like, even eyeballing it, it's easy to get way off. So if you've got a ruler, use a ruler. It's absolutely no shame in that. Let's see. That one's got a little too much. There we go. Yeah, I can even see it. This looks like a more severe angle than this one. Well, that's fine for our purposes here. Because the main point is focusing not on the actual proportions here, but on the composition of it, which is very precise, because you've also got the tops of the door frames. Once again, not a continuous line, but aiming this away. Assuming that I can draw. And these ones cross over our horizon and come basically down to the bottom of the buildings here, although they're mostly interrupted by actual figures. You can see they come down to our ground level. And then, like, there's a very... Like, you can tell from the shadow that there is an edge of the roof, but we only really know that it's tilted because of other buildings in the scene and the context clues from those. Which does bring us to this interesting building. I wanted to sort of get a little bit of context for these side ones so they've got a little bit of shape to them, but really, there's a little bit more to this scene than just the sharp edge... than just the sharp edges and very precise proportions that we're looking at here. This building juts out a little more, and it shows, but even its decorative lining is still going to be following this same... basically, this same rule of everything is oriented towards this center point. However, part of the reason, and I think this is also to help draw... Well, part of it's because they're in a city, and it ought to be a city scene. But part of it is also, once again, to help draw focus to our main characters, who are right in the center spot here. And that's that we don't just have an endless view of the horizon. We're not looking past them. There's no interesting focal point beyond the characters. Because, rather than just continuing this indefinitely into, like, a series of city blocks and streets with maybe a couple of different tall buildings, and then, like, you can see way off in the distance, maybe there's even, like, city gate or something. Or perhaps way out there you can even, like, see the edge, and there's, like, fields and flowers and, like, woods going on. Instead of that, we get cut off pretty early. Like, the edge of this alleyway, or at least the next turn and intersection that it goes down, is very soon. And it's because of these two buildings that aren't on the same perspective plane as us. They're not necessarily very specific, like they're not designed to massively catch the eye, but they keep the city looking a little more natural, a little less just constructed at perfect angles, which medieval cities basically never were constructed at perfect angles. Gone were the days of the Roman roads, and aligning axes and all of that. Instead, we have a couple of benefits from this. One of them is, once again, it gives us context for these roof lines, so we can have this very sloped western-feeling roof. Not that that's inherently Western, but when you think about medieval towns, often, like, this is the kind of roof you would think of. Especially medieval European towns. And we have these lines that, actually, even with these ones, I'm gonna put that one more right there, straight through our center point. But even with these lines, they're still roughly pointing towards our characters. The one on the left here is pointing towards Stark's head. It's very clearly in line. And this one here is, like, the lower one is basically pointing towards Fern's, or Fern's. And so we have our two characters here. Everything in the scene is directing us to them. Even then, it's a busy enough scene that it may not draw your eyes very quickly. So you'll notice that on top of everything else, on top of the stark color contrasts, they also have a slight border where all of the background is erased around them to make sure that they really pop. Because they're fairly dark color palettes, which is befitting of the series and kind of the general tone. Not that it's morose, but it's sort of... I hate to even say melancholic. Because melancholy still implies, like, that it's negative. Maybe even wistful is sort of a longing for the past, but it really feels more like a appreciating the past. Not just moving on from it, but, like, learning to appreciate the present through appreciating the past. It's not one of those desperate to return to better times. It's not I wish I could redo everything I've ever done. Like, there's regrets, but it's not, like, painful regrets that torment someone. The regrets actually lead to character growth, and I think it's part of why I really like Frieren so much. It's done very, very well. And in an age like today where it feels like everyone is drowning in nostalgia, and senses of better times long past, whether or not they were actually better, which is pretty much always debatable, it's nice to see something that's sort of focusing on, yes, the past, there was good stuff in the past, and there's stuff we messed up, and there's bad stuff too, but we can learn from that, we can grow from that, and not just towards some distant, abstract, bright future, but now we can apply little things in our daily lives, appreciating the folks around us and all of that. The series, of course, puts all of this far better than I ever could, but it really, like, Frieren is just wonderful. I think one quote that does not spoil anything from Volume 4, but it really sums up sort of the point of the whole series, is that now is all there is. You can have 1,000 years in your future or 1,000 years in your past, it doesn't matter. You can't change any of those. But right now, you can make choices. You can actually do things and affect them. And, I don't know. I feel like that's a message I have to learn and relearn and relearn constantly. Because I get into the process of optimizing, and I'm a planner. I love thinking about what's coming down the road, what I'm working on, what I'm trying to build towards. Even when I don't have goals, I'm still trying to refine things. And improve the stuff that I'm on. And it's like, sometimes you just need to, like, take this moment and... I hate to say live in the moment, because people always use live in the moment to refer to, like, making, like, wild, bad party choices or whatever, or, like, I don't know, I feel like live in the moment has become a cliche that's used to excuse, like, stupid plans where you don't think about the future, and that's not really what this is. It's more of just realizing that the moment, the current now, is all you really can affect. So it's the thing you ought to, like, focus on for a little bit. You don't, not forever, but, like, for this moment. Don't put off it, not just the don't put off a plans until next week, do it now, but, like, at some point next week will be here, and it will be now. And if you're not willing to do it now, what can you change so that you will be willing to do it next week? How can you set yourself up for success next time? Because if you're not at a point where you can make that choice now, and then you don't do anything different, next week you're also not going to be at a point where you can make that choice. And the week after that, you're also not going to be at a point where you can make that choice. And the week after that, and then you'll just be like, huh, how did I burn a year and not do anything? What happened to 2023? But, like, to To be fair, it's not like you're obligated to use 2023 well or anything like that. You can use it however you like. But if you're feeling like you ought to have used it differently, don't fret too much about the past, and don't, like, burden your future self without helping your future self, you know? Anyway, that's probably reading too much into it, but Frieren's lovely. Really wonderful story. Highly recommend. I made the heads too small. I always make heads too small. Always, always. These characters have good shape design too, I've just realized. Like, it's subtle. It's not, like, overwhelming shape language here, but it's well done. Because they both got their contrasting points, and this isn't necessarily like their forever character design, but in this scene they complement each other really well with this angle. Walking basically as equals, with everything directing the eye towards them. And, like, the stuff that's actually in the distance isn't really that important. It's fairly faded and, like, low detail compared to even the street scene here, the figures here, but especially, well, Fern and Stark. So, but that's probably enough about the composition of this scene. I do like the composition, and the fact that the sky is dark and all the buildings are light actually, like, helps the dark figures pop out more. It's all very well done. But that's not the entire point of today, because today is not just examining composition or general principles of perspective or anything like that. And it's also not for me waxing whimsically about whatever topics of future and past and whatnot. Today is a style study, and dagnabbit, we're going to study that style. So, let's put this little layer away for a second, and let's look at what's actually happening in the architectural style here. Maybe, mouse noises for a second, perhaps. We'll see if the mic is sensitive enough to pick those up. Let's zoom in. Actually, it might be easier. Yeah, you know what? Let's start with with this scene. This one over here. Zoopadoo. Yep, okay. Because I find it interesting the way they do the shading. And the line work. Because the line work is very fine, very consistent for the buildings, and very precise. Like, there's a lot, you may see there's a lot of line weight variance, even in Frieren's hair. Like, the silhouette is darker to make her pop against the background, and the paving stones are even kind of faded around her head, as you might see, just to make sure that she stands out. Whereas the individual hairs are not so dark and so on. But the roof lines are almost all the same line width. There's a very slight difference to imply shadow on each of the sort of rings. Like, you may see that there's sort of like these sort of shingle rings, which I'm not going to do a very precise job of with my broad pen strokes here. There we go, that's better. And you can see that the lower edge is a little bit darker, just to give that shadow. And this upper edge is a little bit darker to give the silhouette, but these individual ring lines don't have a whole lot going on with them. Let's see. And in order to get the nested effect, like, that's interesting. They don't even, like, normally I would expect to sort of, like, taper the line out, and then, like, you've kind of got your loop, and then tapers down, and so on, which is how physically these shingles actually work. But it looks more like the artist has just done a straight line, because, again, it's not an important detail. It's not worth spending, unless you really want it to be a focal thing, you shouldn't be spending, like, tons and tons of time on this. Even if it's in the front view, like, no one's going to be focusing on this unless they're a nerd like us and doing a style study. But, like, so you need to get the impression across without getting, like, all of those details. Which is actually one of those secrets of art that, like, past me would have hated had I known it. Because past me wanted to be very technical and precise. I wanted to be able to render exactly what was in front of me. And the realization that the most realistic, precise, and technical drawings secretly weren't actually max detail would have messed me up. Because if you draw all of the details, then no one, like, it just becomes a blob. It looks, well, not to call out Baroque architecture, but like a lot of Baroque architecture, where there's just stuff everywhere. It's all kind of looks the same amount of important because it's the same amount of detail. And man, your eye can't stinking focus on any of it. It's not drawn to anything. It's like looking at a static screen. There's just so much going on. Especially the Baroque where it's just a solid white color. So there's nothing to make certain areas pop or stand out. It's just, it's all there everywhere. It's like sensory overload in architectural form. Not obvious. I don't like Baroque architecture very much. But to each their own. It certainly has its place, and it certainly is useful for certain specific things. I just think in general it's like a panic attack in an art style. Or a sculpture style. It's just too much. So instead, like, putting detail where it's important, where you want the person to actually look, and then maybe chilling on the detail a little bit everywhere else. It makes your art better, but also it is actually practically beneficial because it gives you more time to focus on the important stuff. And you're not spending all of your time stuck in the sort of backlog backgrounds. I mean, I know I don't do a lot of backgrounds on here. It's something I'd like to do more of, because I actually, believe it or not, I don't know why I've done my streaming this way. My favorite stuff to draw is like landscapes and architecture, and I like using traditional media. And I stream drawing people with digital media. Just because it's, the easier thing to stream. But I would love to do more landscapes and stuff, and like actually be able to get out in the field and do things, and that would be a lot of fun. Just don't want to dox where I am, and people can figure out like your home just based on like a tiny corner of an open window, so like I don't want to risk that. But we're here to talk about style, not about the inexplicable hazards of internet streaming, which are not that big, but they're still there weirdly. As with everything, I suppose. Instead, we're going to look at the style, and we're going to look at another of these time-saving tips, and how to get a lot of bang for your buck. Now, I don't know for sure that the artist uses Clip Studio Paint. There's a very high chance they don't. Clip Studio Paint is designed for manga, so there's a chance they do, but I have no stinking clue. There's a ton of tool options out there. However, whatever they use, I suspect has a very similar resource to... Actually, I'm looking in... Right, I saved this one for the natural parts. I need to go find the proper... I will say Clip Studio Paint does bug me slightly in that the icons change to whatever you last used within a category. So like if we look at this pen, right now it looks like a brush, but if I left it on this one, then it looks like a marker. And I wish it didn't do that, because it makes me lose track of where the heck anything is. Here we go, it's under the lines. But it's these speed lines. And oftentimes I think of these speed lines as being for like dramatic effect. That's oftentimes how you see them. Like, they're motion lines frequently. But that doesn't mean you have to use them for that. Frankly, they work just as well as a sort of hatching. Let's see what the gloom gets us. Okay, yeah, there we go. That's when the curve matters. Also, wonder if I can I angle? Yes, okay. Because basically, what we're seeing here is, let me see if I can get this one to work in my favor here. I did it on the wrong side. Dagnabbit. Oh, right, because I... Okay, let's start with this, and let's go from there. Right, I'm carving it. There we go. This'll do it. I got a little too much on the top, but... And, like, the line density is something we can adjust. But basically, you can use these lines to get a nice shadow, even on a curved surface like this. And if you, choose your line size and line density in a way that isn't hyper dense like this, then you'll be able to get an effect very close to what we're seeing in Frieren. I actually want a slightly larger brush size, because I want it to match the brush that we're using. So let's go for 10 now, and maybe up to 15. Always create speed lines there. Okay, so that's fair. Gap of line I actually want to update as well. Let's double that and see where that gets us. That should keep it mostly to that one side. Still a little too big, still a little too dense. And of course with CSP, well actually there's an easy way to sort of solve this. Because by default it's going to be directly out of, like, well, you can adjust the angle, but probably easier to just do this and adjust the angle manually by grabbing it. So we can make it sort of follow. We can... Okay. This was also, I'll be honest, an excuse to test out these tools. Because they're not something that we've used much of. But you'll see this in Frieren again and again. Like, on this pipe is just one example. Even if we're slightly too dense on this one. But it still gives it that curved form in just a few seconds of work, as opposed to having to go through and actually do a ton of shingles. I wonder if they even had, like, a sort of shingle brush for these curved ones. That's a thing you could make. Because you can see, even along the individual sides of these nested ones going down, there's the same little speed lines. Just used as quick shadow hatching, because there's not really a difference between these and hatching. But then also, not just for those subtle shadows, but we actually see this used quite heavily throughout the style. And I wish I'd gotten a screenshot. There was a shoreline one that would have been a really good example of this too. But we can see it here as well. Oops, let's see. Especially up here. You can see that they handle the darkness and the distance. They just do like a flat layer of these lines over top. I'm sure they've got a customized brush for it or some such. And possibly they do it by hand. You never know. But I would guess that they don't. Because they're already applying screen tones in a lot of other ways. Like you can see here. We've got Fern and Stark. Or Fern. I don't know how they actually pronounce it in... Because all of the names in the manga are just German words. And I'm pretty sure that her name would be Fern in German, but I also know that we're not literally sticking to those pronunciations in it, so maybe they go with Fern. Stark, of course, is fun. And then Frieren herself, German name, Himmel, and Heiter, and all of them, everything. Every town, every person, all of them. There's a character named Genau, which I just love. I don't love the character, to be clear, but I do love that there's a character named Genau. Although I did hear one German speaker complaining that the names are so on the nose that it has accidentally spoiled events. Because it gives away something that... It's like... I'm sure there's a character that's probably named, like, Untrustworthy or something. But it's fun. It gives it a very unique style. And lots of interesting names for characters, which is always fun. I love, like... interesting naming schemes, because I mean, unfortunately a lot of the common ones are so common that they're kind of gimmicky now. Like you can think of, like everyone's done like elemental ones or based on Greek deities or whatever, or like common one is you get like, oh, what is it called? Not the horoscope, but basically the horoscope, all of those different months and so on. And like different concepts like that. But it's always fun to me when someone comes up with a new and intriguing one. Sakura, yes, yeah, I mean that one's been used to death. It's a wonderful name with a lot of symbolic meaning, but there's just nothing you can do with it. By the way, good to see you. Yeah, and Frieren's been wonderful. But we're mainly just doing a little architecture study here. I don't even know if I'm going to have a good title card on this one, because we're just kind of doing a quick look through on some of this stuff. And then next time, tomorrow, we're going to look a lot more into the natural scenes. But just looking at some of the time-saving while still sticking in the style approaches. Because I bet they have a brush for these the pavers too, because this is the same paver style as in the other scene. But you can tell they're able to adjust the angle, so maybe those are hand-done, but I doubt it. It's very different. It's very different from Witch Hat Atelier. Because this one is... I mean, Witch Hat is definitely all about, like, relationships, but this one is focused so much on, like, the people, and there's a specific point that the places are kind of transient. They pass through towns, they come and go all the time, and they do kind of blend together, and I think it's an intentional effect. And not just sort of a whimsical whoops. So, we'll see more of that. Let's see what else we've got here. And then, of course, whenever we return, perhaps after the holidays, perhaps before then, we'll get into the actual characters of Frieren. Because there's a lot of fun... I talk about level of detail a lot, and there's a lot of fun level of detail faces in this one that I look forward to us getting to. A lot of fun scenes. These leaves are an interesting one too. I want to talk about those more next time. We'll take a few moments on this one. And let's, you know what? Maybe I will on this one. Let's see if we can actually, like, we've been sort of messing around with these. Let's actually have a go at recreating this scene and studying it a little more. And then actually applying some of that stuff. Maybe we can pull out another Rotenberg photo, or Mont Saint-Michel would be too detailed for this at the moment. And I will actually, like, lean into the line tool. Let's... I don't like the phrase work smarter, not harder. For no reason. It's a perfectly fine phrase. I just have... The first person I heard it from was not someone I'm fond of. So I've got a personal bias, but, like, it's not a bad slogan to live by. Like, don't waste your own time, especially not because frequently the time-wasting stuff also gets you worse results. So it's just all around, like, pick your battles. Choose what you actually want to illustrate. And this one, I think we can get an interesting scene here, just leaning into some very quick line work, and let's look at how quickly we can actually set up a scene here, even if, like, I'm not going to worry that much about getting exact precision on this. We're just going to kind of play it by ear and see how quickly we can set up something that looks halfway decent. Okay. Let's see, that one's slightly left of the halfway point, and our canvas size is obviously not quite the same either. Scooch that over just a hair. We really want this alleyway to feel like it's off to the side. Interesting that those actually do seem to have a very slight tilt to them. Oh, right, because the page was bent. Okay, yep. That would be that. Put extra there. And then we'll mess with the line weight here in a second, but I just want to get these sort of construction lines sorted out. Whoops, got that slightly wrong there. Vector lines, this is one thing that digital art is nice, is you can just fix your lines, and they're just fixed, and you're done. It saves a lot of time and energy. Wait, let's drop down our pen size a little bit, because we've got some of those sort of heavyweight lines, but there's a lot of these where, like, the line weight on most of these structures is fairly faint because they're not supposed to be focal points. I think I need this one to be... Hold on. Yeah, because if I'm looking at the sort of width on that compared to the height... Yeah, okay, that's better. I'm measuring, for the record, as with everything, the objective size doesn't matter, but the size relative to other stuff on the page absolutely does. And so I'm looking at this scene, and I'm seeing that we want this to be narrower than the height. Now, even knowing that we're losing some of the height from our framing, I think that's still an important ratio to try to maintain best we can. And with our thinner weight one, we can get the sort of partner of this line here. And it's, in fact, a very close partner as well. We've got a little bit of perspective. Once again, the angles of the streets here, we're going to have the same sort of horizon lines. Well, not horizon lines, but vanishing points here. We want to make sure that we're thinking these through, where these lines are pointing. And if you're ever in doubt and you're trying to bluff it, you're not trying to go the full-on precision, which I don't actually recommend with perspective stuff, but pay attention to the height of each endpoint of the line, and that'll at least get you closer. For all three of these little sort of stone edge pieces, the left side is higher than the right. So we're not like at a point where we're going to be seeing an extreme perspective change here. We're not like getting a vanishing point somewhere in this alley. Instead, because we're behind Frieren, who is on a rooftop, everything in this scene is below us, and so it's going to be all basically below the horizon line too. So it's going to be the same angle. Anything that's on the same side of the horizon line is going to be not necessarily the same exact angle. Like, it's not, like, it may not all match, like, parallel, but it'll always have the same relative angle. Like, this one is always pointing generally upwards. Like, all three of these are, because they're all below the horizon line, so they're on the same side of that horizon line, which is somewhere off the top of the panel, frankly, because we're way high above it. So we can see we've even got, like, kind of this faint window frame in here, which has all of the details that you need to see that's a window frame. And even a little bit more, but it's still, once again, matching these angles here. Bottom is actually a little bit higher than this one, once again, trying to keep that relative proportion in check. The second one hits just slightly above this one. And of course, I need to keep in mind that there's an inner frame here. And we've even got like the little edge. Like you get, like there is perspective here. It's not just all thrown together. Like this is still thought out, but it's not given more attention than it needs, which is sort of that balance that's always hard to find, frankly. I need to read The Girl from the Other Side. That one's been on my to-read list solely from the art style. It looks amazing. And especially now that we're getting back into style studies, it might be a good excuse to finally get around to that one. Because yeah, that's one of those ones where like I feel like I could probably read the whole thing even if I didn't like the story, just because the art is absolutely gorgeous. Let's see. I'm doing this window frame. I won't go to the same detail on all of the other ones. Although, frankly, with some of these, not this one. Actually, interesting perspective thing there with this window frame seems to be a kind of a different angle. Once again, that could be the page being bent, to be fair. I'll give the benefit of the doubt there that that's just because this one was right on the edge of the seam. I'm just going to get like the rough feel in here. Trying to keep the widths consistent, though. Because that will be immediately noticeable if that's off. If you've got, well, I mean, even like this one down here, it looks obviously wrong and sloppy. Whereas if I can just get it down to the right angle, it will immediately look less bad. Once again, I need to make sure that these angles are appearing relatively correct compared to each other and the other objects in the scene. For the record, the way to do this well would be to just do the grid. And then, because of vector lines, you can erase everything in the middle. And, like, much easier to not have to line up stuff on opposite sides. And, of course, if you use the right vector size eraser, that's quick and fast. We'll do that for the other windows. But this one, we're basically at the end, so I'm just gonna KO it real quick. Okay, good! I'm glad to hear another positive review. Because, honestly, I hadn't heard that much about it. I've just sort of stumbled across it and seen it in a few places. And I was like, wow, that looks like something that I ought to check out. So I'm glad to know that it's good. Let's see. A little bit here just to give, once again, we want to get that sense of depth, so we need at least something on here to give that context. The arches do a good job too. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and draw sort of a line here for the tops of those arches, and then we could just do a curve, and, well, we could do a better curve than that. But I suspect that we're going to want to use maybe a Bezier. I do like Mason Bezier curves, because they give us a pretty good fine point control, although I've done a right terrible job of that one, so let's maybe not work on that one. This is what I get for not practicing the tools before I do a stream. Just because holidays are busy. Okay, there we go. Then we can pull it up. Unfortunately, you can see that that's not going to get us quite the curve we need because it only has these 3 points to work with, and we'd really kind of want 5 to do it well, but it's a good starting point because we can... Alright, I didn't want to multi-select there. We can use this for the top of the arch, and we can really like soften the top of this curve a little bit. Wish that we could sort of pull out a little more. It'll be our starting point because we're just trying to do a quick and simple way to do this. Yeah. I'm going to pull that more this way, the whole thing over a hair. And then I guess I got to adjust line width on this one, so let's make these match. For the next one, once again, we want to... Oh, that's continuous curve. Possibly useful, but let's focus on this one for now. It's interesting, it's tap, release, and then just drag. Not quite the control scheme I would have expected. Interesting. Well, this is becoming a how-to Clip Studio Paint tutorial as much as it is anything else. And that's always useful to have, too. We don't actually need that line, and we only need this where it's visible behind. But even with just this, and especially actually the handrail really adds to it too, so I'm going to grab that one real quick. Just going to throw it in there real quick. feel like that. We don't want it to line up with this or we'll get kind of a weird tangent and the perspective will get messed up. And I can see they've kind of gone for a faded edge on one of these lines because it doesn't need to be super bold and it will sort of carry too much weight if you get all of those lines repeated if you're not careful. So having a little, like just a little bit of a breakup in it makes it look a little more believable. And we can hide the parts of these, whoops, that need to be behind it. And it does, like, this little alleyway back here, it doesn't have much detail in it. It doesn't need much detail in it. And in fact, in just a second here, well, we don't even need to make another layer because we'll automatically do it. But when we go to these speed lines, I'm just gonna add a big ol' stinking swath. Fortunately, I just have the scattered ones. I wonder if there's a way to... maybe no grouping. Let's see how this one does it. Not how I would like. Let's see. Always do create a speedlines layer. I think we might need slightly more... I want to up the brush size there to at least like 6 for now. Maybe 5 because they're slightly less definite than the other lines, but they're fairly close. Gap is 30, grouping length, stead lines. Oh, it's because I have the wrong color selected. There we go. That explains it. So I suspect that this is going to actually put it on the outside of this, which we don't want. Yep. There we go. But we can adjust the rotation here. If we can't do it here, we can do it on the next stage, so that's easy enough. And then I'm basically going to just take a big old swath and make it the correct size for this. Well, this'll do. Then I'm going to grab it, and we're going to rotate it to fit what we need. We'll pop it in the alleyway. Yeah, it is a little bit too dark. Just adjust it there, though. And then we'll see if it lets me just erase any of the ones that we don't want. I'm not sure that it will. I'm curious. Yeah, that figures. Doesn't want the speed lines ending. But... okay, and we get the curve there. Interesting. But that's just something I need to figure out with this particular speedlines tool. Interesting that the curve functions that way. Ah, okay, so there's our density. That'll group them more again. Yeah, okay, and then less. Well, we can check that one and have another go, I would say. Doopy-doo. See if we can't... well, we don't want to make curve. Draw on speedlines layer. Draw on editing layer. Let's try that one. I'm going to make a new layer for it. And let's see if that'll let us edit it the way that we want to. I'm going to once again... I'm just going to throw this down real quick, because we know that we can pretty easily rotate it. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm just going to... actually, we'll use our normal rotation tools, because this isn't on a speedline specific layer. But you can tell there's a speedlines layer icon. This is just a normal raster layer. We'll just grab the whole darn thing and use our typical select and rotate option. Drag it over here, kind of condense it once again. We still have that option. And then, now that we've done that, we will baby crash CSP because that was manipulating too many objects, but we're good. Now, if we'd done this on a vector layer, we'd be able to just very easily erase all of these bottom ones now. However, we're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. Or, if you don't want to bother with that, we can use our select tool to get pretty close, and then just use the clear button to chuck all of that. And we'll do a nice cleaner sweep with the actual eraser here. We'll use the vector one, but we'll make it a hair larger. This is one of those reasons the vector lines are really nice, though. Is because you wouldn't have to get in here and do this. It can just erase right up to the next intersection line, which is just a wonderful feature to have. But we are on this layer, though, so I don't have to worry too much about precision here. Because I'm not going to accidentally erase that main border line, which is the actual important one. And I will erase any of these that intersect over here, because this should be in front of the alley. and any of these that are on the handrail, because the handrail is also in front of this. Not going to worry too much about the handrail's columns because they're basically... Okay, that got a little sloppy there. I know we're trying to do a fairly quick and sloppy throw together of this scene, but not quite that quick and sloppy. Alright, we'll grab our vector line. We'll do a real faint one in here. Just to clear these out. They shouldn't be there. And that one. Okay, and then we'll go back to our larger eraser just to clear these last little remnants. And that's still a lot faster than trying to do a bunch of parallel cross-hatching. Like, even with all those hiccups, and you know, with just a couple more goes, you could get that down to a rhythm and not have to worry about that at all. That is much faster than actually manually hatching all of that. We can adjust the opacity here if we want to make that a little fainter. And then, unfortunately, I don't have that nice grid hatching that they have. But, I mean, you could just do two parallel ones, really. Like, we could just do another one at a different angle. I will note that this particular hatching here definitely, like, part of the way they give depth to this, like, the hatching, the main point of it is to give a little bit of depth here. Partly makes it believable, partly helps set the setting, partly also draws your eye in that direction, because that's where Fern and Stark actually are. Because they're kind of hidden away here. They're not any bigger than the other characters, so, like, you need something to pull the eye that way. Fern's facing them, which also helps. Not Fern. Frieren. But even then, the other way that they give a lot of depth back here is that every single surface is a different type of hatching. Which, again, would be very tiresome to do manually. And so I'm not going to dig into that too much. Let's see. I wonder if they have one of these. These focus ones tend to emerge out from a point. I mean, technically they focus in on a point. But, like, you do your circle here, and then it's everything outside of that circle. And, oops. What we could really use here is actually the opposite of that, where we can just select an area and have it autofill. Because that would be very handy right now. As it stands, I think I probably just need to go chase down some proper brushes for that. Because all we have are these speed lines ones, which, as you saw, are a little bit unwieldy for our purpose, although with a little bit of practice, I'm confident we could get them there. But, like, trying to do this is not going to get quite the result that we want. Yeah. But I think that that gives a reasonable sense of how they do that. And once again, there's not any other flat colors up there. It's just hatching. It's just done with this very quick and easy hatching. But we see that even this isn't... It's not like just a direct grid across it. The way that they give this depth is that both of the grid axes for this lower panel here are different from the grid axis that is on this vertical. This one actually follows the path. And then this one is horizontal to give maximum contrast. Which, again, just throwing these down real quick here as an example, we're not doing like a nice finished piece. Not all of our style studies will end up with a lovely finished piece like some of the last ones did. Boop, 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 boop. And a little bit more. And then, of course, back here we've got a much darker that's basically... Like, let's actually look into it, because I believe it's a series of arcs. Yeah, it's going to be a little hard to see from this. But it's very dense hatching. And you'll notice even specifically that it's extremely dense along the edge of this where it's darker, and you can still see some of the path here is lighter, but as you get up into the rafters, it gets more dense with the hatching. And I think that really is just like 3 axes of hatching there, mostly horizontal, but with some vertical lines as well. The horizontal, and then you get like a curve, like not a curve, but an angle in here. Again, just throwing this down. Very dense on the sides here, where there's almost no white gaps at all. Like up here, it's basically solid from how densely hatched it is. And then it slowly fades into areas of more and less hatching. I definitely suggest checking out the Witch Hat VODs that we did on that one for a lot more detail on hatching. We'll definitely get into it later, but at the moment it's not really where I'm spending my time on this stream. But having that variety gives this, like you can see, this one is still pretty flat compared to this one that is slowly getting the kind of depth that we would want it to have. Even with fairly quick and sloppy line work. Let's see. I want to get a little bit there just so that it's got the pop that it needs. I'm not going to go to the same level. Okay. And then, I will say, while we're still looking at this, because we're getting close to the end of stream time already, again, I'm sorry about that late start that we got here. But just to break it up a little bit, the line weight does have some variance, so it's not just, like, these lines we have here with this particular brush, each individual line may have a different weight, like this one's pretty thick, these are pretty thin. However, like, the line is the same weight top to bottom. You can see that's not the case in our reference, where we've got some, like, under this window, where it may be, like, a little darker and then fade back down. But they're still very straight. More than I want to attempt to fake with all these parallel lines to show me how wrong that I am. But then you've also got a few of these just like patches that's just a little bit of texture. It's not even necessarily like a specific texture. It just gives a little bit of wear and tear, or maybe a spot where a little bump is catching the light differently, and you'll see that across a lot of different surfaces. But look at these stones next to it. And you've got, rather than the sharp line work we have here, there's like a little crackle. A little bit may have worn off there. There's a little on the top of that one. This one's got a little bit coming in from the side, and so on. And the texture of the paper contributes a little bit here, but even then there are intentionally drawn spots that just give it that little extra bit. Each stone looks a little bit different. And it gives it a lot more life. And we see once again we have just a couple of these like simple straight lines. We've got a couple coming from the bottom just to cast that tiny bit of shadow that this stone might be casting without making it too much of a focal point. Got a little bit of perhaps damaged stucco here. Once again, these are supposed to be real places, not just perfect, simple, like highly pristine. And real places always have just a little bit of texture to them. You can see we've got like a little stain on the wall here of some sort. Let's see. We could probably just kind of get with like a little swirl like that, and a few extra lines here to break that up, and then it kind of just ties into some of the lower ones. But it's this combination. So to kind of do a recap of what's actually working here, you get the very simple shapes, you get the very like clean edge lines, and you're not aiming for a lot of detail in those necessarily. You're just trying to get the forms across, as we see with the arcs that that pass along the lower pipe, of course. It's not a pipe, of course, it's the top of the shingles on that roof. But we have these arcs, they're parallel with each other. They're very simple, they don't worry about the silhouette of this angling properly to actually fit into each other. They're there, they get the idea across, they give it a little bit of form and texture. And then you have the very simple shading hatching here, some of it in just full swaths, to cover an area to give it a little depth or a little shadow. Some of it in like sort of subtle edges, but never like we're not getting very precise like cell shaded edges. We're also not getting like very detailed what the actual shadow of these objects would look like. It's just to give a little bit of texture where the shadows should be, so that you're still getting that depth. Like under the balcony, we have just kind of broad strokes over the windows. You'll see that they don't like. It's not like they're following in with the windowsill. It's not like we're actually adding more hatching under the windowsill. They rely on sort of just these darker patches to do that. But the lines, these are just straight down across the top of the windows. Because that's all it needs. This isn't something that needs to be a focal point. We just need to know, yeah, the balcony's got a little bit of a shadow, that looks right. Because it is right. And that way they can focus their time on giving every single character in here this little extra bit of life that makes this scene feel lived in. Because that's a much better use of time and focus. And then, in order to break that up, because if you just do the flat lines, it does look a little bit like... It doesn't look believable. It does become noticeable when you just have parallel lines. So making sure that the lines have just a little bit of width variance, even when you've seen me just adding a couple of manual scribbles in here, has made this wall look much better. And then to top off that, in a different angle from the hatching, adding just not even angle, but just that little bit of texture to break up the rhythm of it, because you don't want like the hyper aggressive parallel lines to actually be drawing the eye too much. They're just there to sort of fade into the background, so they need to be the right amount of believable. They're not so uniform that they're noticeable. They're not so dark and precise and detailed that they're eating all of your time. They're just the right balance. And that balance of time does kind of fit well into the point of Frieren, the story of Frieren itself, which I won't dig into too much more, because again, just go read it. It's wonderful. At least the first 4 volumes. Beyond that, it's kind of a different story, but still a good one. And then it kind of goes back and forth, but like I like it a lot. And from what I've seen of the first couple episodes of the anime, it's really staying true to it. But it's these subtle techniques. It's about applying the time where it matters. It's the only time as they said, the only time there is now. So you shouldn't rush through it just to get to the end, but you also shouldn't just squander it completely on side quests. You need to spend it focusing on either the people in your life, or in this case, the characters in the drawing that actually matter. So I think that's perhaps a slightly crowbarred in lesson at the end, but it fits, and even if it's crowbarred in, it still fits, so doesn't mean it's wrong. We can look at the windows a little bit more for these last couple moments, but they're basically just, actually this is a technique I like, is just making a very heavy line where you need a large shadow. We'll go back onto this layer for this one. And I'm just going to go and get like a fairly wide brush, wider than that. And we'll clean up the edges on this one. But just a very heavy line where we need that shadow. And it does the work. Like, we're not going to worry about hatching or anything like that. We're just going to get the line. This is a risky one because it's a heavy bit of darkness, so if you're not careful, it will draw the eye too much. The fact that it's used fairly consistently for these arches and everything means that it's not, like, standing out uniquely on the scene. But more importantly, the fact that the characters all have much larger, darker swaths. Like, you've got basically everyone's pants or dresses have the much larger, like, black sections, so they draw the eye far more than even a fairly dark window does. Even the dark alley down there doesn't draw the eye nearly as much. If this was the darkest thing in the scene, it would be really bad. Well, not really bad, but it would be worse. It would be a worse illustration. And then, of course, the other thing we have is the screen tones. Yay, screen tones. Do I even have any, like, decent... I guess I've got the hatching. But that that's a little dense. Let's maybe chill on that a little bit. No, okay. I need more gap is what I need. Then larger brush size. Oh, okay, yep, there we go. And then maybe not for tone scraping. I mean, that's basically what we're doing here. CSP has a lot of built-in cross-hatching options, which your mileage may vary. Yeah, see, that's too wide. Or too dense, rather. Fixed. See, the thing is, I think I want a larger brush size, and then because I want the actual, like, brush to be larger. So that it's not just, filling in hyper dense like it's a pen. Because that's so small, I mean, I guess stipling is basically what we're going for. Make this slightly larger and see how it does. Okay, this might be closer to what we need. We don't need hatching for this anyway. That's too big. Go to 40. Let's see how 40 does. Nah. I need to actually, like, get in here for some screen tones, as opposed to, like, just these effects. Because there's overlap, but it's a little different. And we'll get into the leaves next time, because they'll be fun, especially with a particularly large brush size. Interesting. Lots of good leaf brushes out there. I'm curious No, this is a different sort. But the way they use it is intriguing. We'll get into this more next time. But you get like sort of the darker leaves for the silhouette, and then you get the highlights using just the lighter leaves directly on top of them, so you still get that shaping. We'll talk about that more on the next stream. We won't dig into that too much tonight. But, you know, again, we don't have any nice, like, finished pieces to sort of look at as our final culmination here, because we were looking more at techniques and strategies than the style itself. Because I think that's sort of the point of Frieren backgrounds. It's a lot more about the techniques and applying them well than it is, like, specifically the style necessarily. Interesting screen tone clouds. We'll explore those a little bit next time, too. We'll get into the nature more, but it does tend to follow the same pattern. I'd say Frieren, in general, puts a lot more focus on characters and the expressiveness of the characters and their designs than it does on the background and the world around them. And that's something that you'll find in a lot of style studies, actually, is sort of getting a feel for what the artists are prioritizing, what matters to their story or to their art, and thinking about, when you're doing your art, where do you want to put your focus? Do you want to have these grand backgrounds that are highly detailed and all of them recognizable and distinct, at the expense that's going to take a lot of time and commitment, and that's potentially going to distract from your characters unless you're very precise with your composition? Or would you rather focus more on the characters themselves, let the backgrounds kind of fade? Or a different balance, like it's certainly not a one or the other thing. You can find different ratios, you can do different ratios on different pages, you can have grand setup shots that are extremely precise and detailed and give a lot of life to the world, and then your individual pages might just be a little small scope, not putting as much focus on it. That's one way to do it. But it depends on the story you're trying to tell, or if you're trying to tell a story at all, although in a sense almost every illustration is trying to tell a story, even if it's just the story of, hey, this character's personality is excited or sad or, you know, bouncy or whatever. There'll still be some story behind it, even if it's just a one-panel comic, basically. But definitely, like, sort of thinking about what is it you want to focus on? What do you want your reader to focus on? Because when we're doing the art, we know what we're focusing on. It's easy to figure that out. But how do you get the person looking at it to focus on the same things? And these techniques we looked at today, some of them rudimentary, and some of them admittedly tools that I haven't had the time to practice with that I would like. But they're all still useful, and they can all still be applied in a lot of different ways. So I hope that y'all find them helpful. Whether you're here listening in stream today, or you're watching one of the VODs, which, once again, I'm not sure what's happened with the algorithm. I'm tentatively excited that people seem to watch them sometimes, but I don't know if, like, that just showed up on a whim, and I don't know why. So it could just vanish on a whim. So we'll just enjoy while we've got it, and we'll see what happens. That said, our next Frieren style studies, we'll obviously look at the nature more tomorrow, but then after that, we might be taking 2 weeks off for the holidays. We might do some streams intermittently in there. I really don't know yet. We're going to sort of play it by ear, because I've got family coming to town, so I'm going to make sure I have the time to spend with them. And I hope that y'all are able to do some of that yourselves, either with family or found family, whoever it is you're spending the time with. And I hope that y'all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, night, whenever it may be for you, and that I'll see y'all on the flip side.